All right, let's create a new report. I'll come over here to Solution Explorer, right-click on Reports, and add a new item, and I'll select Report. And I'm going to name this Nested Groups. Of the three reports I'm going to build, this is going to be the most complex one in terms of groups. But it's based on a table, which in a lot of ways is the simplest form of the Tablix. So I'll go ahead and add that, and that creates the file and opens it up in the Report Designer. Now, in order to use a shared data set in a new report, I have to create a report data set that makes it available, that shared data set available to the report. So over here in Report Data, I'm going to right-click on Dataset, add a dataset, and I'll create a new dataset. I'm going to call it Sales by Year, Category, Subcategory, Dataset. Okay. Certainly don't need to use anything that verbose, but I like to name the datasets the same name as the underlying shared dataset. Certainly not a requirement, but that keeps it straight which one's referring to what. Okay, I'm going to keep the Use a Shared Dataset radio button selected, and I want to use that dataset right there. Okay, I'll click on OK, and now I have a report dataset that is based on that shared dataset. But notice I didn't have to add the query back in. So now I just have a single query in a single location. Most importantly, I now have access to all of the individual fields that are returned by that dataset. Okay, it's time to start building the report. So I'm going over to the toolbox. I'm creating a tabular report, so I'll use a table. And I'll come in and add it and put it fairly close to the corner. Okay, could put it right in the corner, whatever. Now, when I first add this table to the report, there's initially no data set associated with it. And the dataset name property of the table is going to be blank. But the first time that you add a field to the table, the designer is going to automatically populate that property with the name of the dataset that's associated with that table. All right, now it's time to start adding detail fields from the dataset to the table. So I'll come over here into Report Data, and I'll pin that open, make it a little bit easier to use. And I'm going to drag the sales amount field, put it in the first column. And then I'll drag over the order quantity and the average sale. Because those are the three detailed fields, detail row fields, that I want to include in the report. So now that the details row is populated with fields, I can start adding the hierarchy of groups. One way to do that is to drag the grouping fields to the Row Groups pane of the Report Designer, this area right down here. But because I'm creating a group hierarchy, it's easier to add them using properties of table rows, which will automatically add the grouping fields to this Row Groups pane. So I'm going to start out by right-clicking the Details row, and specifically the Sales Amount field, and I'm going to add Group, Parent Group, within the row group section. Okay, because I'm dealing with rows here, this is a table. Okay, that opens up the Tablix Group dialog box. So here I want to select Subcategory, because that's going to be the innermost group that I want to nest by. I don't have to necessarily do them in that order, but mentally for me it makes sense to essentially build from the detail rows up to the more general groups. And so this is going to be the parent group of the details group, or the details row. And I'll click on OK, and that adds subcategory, including showing that this is a group right there, and it encompasses the details, and it automatically added subcategory here to the row groups. Now, by the way, you might have noticed an option within that dialog box to add group header. If I had checked that, then the subcategory field would be on a header row above the details row. Now, the overall report is going to be the same. The subcategory won't appear as the same row on the same row as the details, so it's more a stylistic kind of an arrangement. But in this particular report, putting things on the same row, I think makes for a nicer, more understandable layout. But it just depends on what your users want or what the requirements are for the report. Okay, next I'm going to add the category parent group, which is the next step up the group hierarchy. So I'm going to right-click on the subcategory row here because I'm going to add a parent of the subcategory group. So once again, add group. Now my only option is row group because I right-clicked on a row group. And so I'm going to once again create a parent group. Then I get this Tablix group dialog box again. And I'm going to select category this time. And there's that option I was telling you about. I'm going to leave it unchecked again because I want them all on the same line. And I'll click on OK. And so now we have the next step up that hierarchy. And now I can add the top level of the hierarchy to once again add group, parent group of the row group. And this time I'm going to select calendar year. Okay, so there are all three of my groups. They're all nested. There's a hierarchy to them. And notice that all three of these round brackets there encompass that single row because it's hierarchical and I opted to put them all on a single row. Notice too that there's this double vertical dashed line here that separates the group columns from the detailed columns. All right, so this is still a work in progress, but let's go ahead and preview the report to see what it has, see what it looks like. Takes a few moments, has to go out to the database, grab the data, it's not yet cached, and there we have it. So as you can see, it's fairly plain, without any totals or subtotals whatsoever. I haven't added those yet. I can scroll down, go from page to page. I'm on page 2 now. And page 3, happens that page 3 doesn't have any data on it. Okay, so I'll go back to the first page there. So next what I want to do is add some totals and spiff up the report a little bit. First thing I want to do is widen the subcategory column here. Let's see, we don't need that anymore, so I'll get rid of that. And just so that the data all fits. So here's where I need to do a little bit of back and forth with the subcategories, scroll down through everything, make sure that that's wide enough for all the subcategories in the report. Okay, looks like it is. But sometimes you may have to go back and forth between design and preview to get that right. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add the category subtotal. So I'm going to right-click the subcategory here, and keep in mind that this square brackets here is a shortcut notation for the full expression that's this field's subcategory.value. All right, so I'll right-click on that, and I'll select Add Total, and I'm going to put it after that row. I could put it before all the rows if I wanted the total to be at the top. So I'll do that, and notice that now I have a total there, and it's within the category group. Because I'm going to sum all of the categories, there's only one row per category, and I'm going to get a total for a particular category. And just to make it a little bit clearer what this is, I'm going to say category total. So that'll make it very clear what these totals are. And I'm also going to come over here and delete the sum of the average sale. Sum of an average has some uses in some context, but not here. It's not really a useful piece of information. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now, I could certainly calculate an average sale for the category or later for the calendar year by performing a calculation, but summing up those average values isn't really meaningful information. Okay, so now I'm going to add a total for each year by right-clicking on category, adding a total, once again after, and so now you can see that there's a total row for the calendar year. And I'll once again change the label here to annual total. And finally, I'll get rid of that sum of the average again. Okay, next thing I want to do is add a grand total for the report, and I'm using the same basic steps, but this time I'm going to right-click on calendar year and select Add Total and put it after. Because this is the top group within the hierarchy, it's not included in any further group. There is no group that's higher up in the hierarchy. And I'll once again remove the sum of the average sale. So at this point, the structure of the report is in its final form. So I'll preview the report one more time. And there you can see that we now have these totals by category. So here's the total for bikes. Here's the total for clothing. Here's the total for components. And then an annual total, which is all of the total for all of those categories for the year, in this case, 2005. And then if we go to the end of the report, you can see that there's now a total, a grand total here at the bottom of the report. And I can see I forgot to change that total. So I'll come back over to Design and change that to Grand Total. All right, so the structure's there. And so now I'm going to put the finishing touches on the appearance of the report. Make the information a little bit easier for the user's eye to see what's going on. All right, so the first thing I want to do is format the dollar amounts as currency. So the first one here is sales amount. Now I'm going to show you a little trick here. Unfortunately, what I'd really like to do is select all of those amounts there and average sale there, and right-click and select text box properties, but it's disabled, as you can see, because I can't do that for multiple cells. Unfortunately, the report designer just isn't smart enough. So what I'm going to do instead is come down here and right-click on that there, do text box properties, come here to number, select currency, 2 decimal places is fine, going to add a thousands separator, and click on OK, and now I've set that property there. All right, then I'm going to come over to properties with that same cell selected and find the format field. It's a little bit easier if they're alphabetical, so I'll just select that, and I'm going to copy that right there. I could certainly try and type that in, but I'd probably make a mistake and I'd have to correct things and just get really hard. So now what I can do, because I have that in the clipboard, I can select these other fields, and rather than going through the text box properties, I can go back over here directly to this properties window and paste that in, and that applies that to all of the selected text boxes. Okay, it's a little trick that makes that a little bit easier. So I'm going to do the same thing here with order quantity, because this isn't currency. Instead, it's a number. I don't want any decimal points, but I do want thousand separators. So I'll click on OK there, come back over here, copy that format string, and put that in all those locations as well. All right. So again, hopefully that made sense. It was just a convenient way to use the text box properties to set the formatting once, and then I went over to the properties window, copied that format string, because I can never remember quite everything and how it gets all put together, and then I apply that to multiple fields. That's a real handy technique if instead of there were 4 or 5 more fields, there was perhaps dozens within a particular report. I could apply it all in one fell swoop, and I know that the formatting is the same for all of those different text boxes. Okay, I'll go to preview, and there you can see we now have nicely formatted currencies for all the totals and the individual rows and so forth, and we have the formatted order quantities, and then we also have the nicely formatted average sales figure. Okay, so far so good. Okay, next thing I want to do is make the header, footer, and the subtotal rows bold. And so I'll select each of those rows, select that, and I'll select that one, and that, and I can hit the space bar, or actually, I'm sorry, the control key, and select both of those. All right, so now we have all the bold fields there. Then the last thing I want to do is add some highlight to the annual and grand total rows, just to make them easier for the user to pick out. So the first thing I want to do is select just the annual total. Then I'll go over to the properties window here and find the background color. And I'll go ahead and set that to a light gray. That should be right there. There we go. And then I'll select the grand total row here, go over here into background colors, and set that equal to blue. And as you see, now there's no contrast with the font, and so I want to change the font color to white. Okay, much more readable. All right, I'll preview the report one more time, and there you can see the final format. You can scroll down here, the annual totals are highlighted, the category totals are highlighted by virtue of being bold, so the eye can pick them out fairly easily. Let's go to the second page, just keep scrolling down, and there's the third page. Notice that I've added enough rows that it's flowed, there is actually stuff on the third page. And there's the grand total, which is in the blue with the white text.